Tom Cronin, one of the world's leading meditation teachers. This is the man teaching experts how to take themselves to the next level.
A lot more companies are realizing that there's a way to optimize human brains, there's a way to optimize the human experience, and that comes from a de-excited space. It doesn't come from overloading and overworking staff and trying to grind out as much as they can. You can do that with a piece of machinery. You can work that piece of machinery, a tractor or a truck, 24/7 as long as it goes until it breaks down. But a human's slightly different. It has a lot more variables to it than that.
If you are looking to change your life, getting a complete understanding of your mind, your brain, and how you bring your dreams into reality is crucial. Tom is an expert in just that.
The manifestation process, the first lever that we've got to work with is intention of thought. The thought that we have inside our head is almost like a signal that sends out into the ether, into the field of pure potential. What we have in that field is all possibility currently in that field right now. This Apple mouse cannot have been manifest without someone having an initial thought about creating this mouse.
Enjoy the podcast, my friends. Leave us a like, comment down below, check out our Rumble, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify for the love of God. TheWayOfWillJohn.com is where you can find exclusive content and more from all of our guests, so check it out. Enjoy. We will see you later. Peace.
The Way of Will John.
Tom, we have finally made the impossible happen. After weeks or years of working together to try and get us together, we're here. Welcome. How's it going?
Mate, it's great. It's good to be here after all this this long journey to get here, but I'm really looking forward to diving in and having a good chat with you.
Okay. Well, listen, obviously we have quite a bit. I have quite a few questions, and I know we'll dig into those. But first, as always, it'd be nice to hear who you are from the man himself. So how would you describe Tom Cronin and his journey and mission?
Such a big question. How long have we got? I guess when we get asked that question, who am I? Who are we? We tend to respond with, what do we do? And that's the first inclination because it's the obvious sort of statement about who we are. So if I was to start with that, what do I do? I teach meditation. I'm an author of books. I'm a speaker. I work with some of the top companies from Boston Consulting Group, Amazon, Qantas, Coca-Cola, Oracle. I run retreats. I mentor conscious leaders like yoga teachers, meditation teachers, how to grow their businesses and make more impact in the world. I'm a father of 2 beautiful children. I'm a husband in a partnership for 35 years. So this is who I am as far as what do I do. But then when we get to a more esoteric response to that, who am I? I would say what comes to mind is I'm the field of consciousness temporarily expressing itself as a form that's perceived to be Tom. And that field is an infinite, eternal field of conscious awareness that fluctuates in its expression through forms. And I'm delighted to temporarily be that expression as Tom at this point in time.
That's awesome. It's a bit similar to a couple of other guests we've had on to some degree. Billy Carson has an interesting and very similar way of describing himself. And you now teaching meditation, and meditation just in and of itself has become a buzzword throughout the last 10, 15, whatever, 20 years. I don't know how long it's been going on. Mindfulness. You work with these companies, so I want to dig straight in because this is a unique opportunity for me. When you work with these companies, these massive companies that you're talking about, what is it that they're looking to gain from you specifically with meditation practice?
I can be polite and I can be blunt.
Please be blunt.
I think a lot of companies in general want to tick some boxes. To be seen that they're doing the right things and making sure that they're, getting all the right, boxes ticked for their company. I think some companies genuinely have a very deep interest in the well-being of their staff, knowing that there's, an understanding that the company itself is a collection of people in a particular state of mind. And so that success of a company will come down to the group of people that are involved in the company. And they understand now that the state of mind of those people, the state of their nervous system, the state of their physiology is going to determine to some degree the level of success that company is going to have. And I think that a lot more companies are realizing that there's a way to optimize human brains. There's a way to optimize the human experience. And that comes from a de-excited space. It doesn't come from overloading and overworking staff and trying to grind out as much as they can. You can do that with a piece of machinery. You can work that piece of machinery, a tractor or a truck, to 24/7 as long as it goes until it breaks down. But a human's slightly different. It has a lot more variables to it than that. And so we can really have a very incredibly optimized human, but it does require a lot of, attendance to the state of that human. And so a lot of companies are starting to realize that. And that's a big part of what I want to do, is work with those companies to help them realize that incorporating meditation and particular modalities and practices and will really determine the level of resilience and leadership and productivity and efficiency of that person. So that's a big part of what I do with the companies now. I think they're appreciating that.
TheWayOfWillJohn.com, exclusive content and programs on manifestation, making money, hidden knowledge. Finally, reach your full potential.
When you're looking at this optimization, and I think all individuals know that regardless of where they're at, they could be doing better in many aspects, and meditation can play a huge role in that. What does that actually look like then? Could you get into maybe some more concrete things for it? Because I know our audience is always looking for ways to perform better, to practice these sorts of things. How do you structure that for people?
The first thing that comes to mind is the third law of thermodynamics that states that as de-excitation occurs, we see greater levels of order in a system. And as we see greater levels of excitation in a system, we see greater levels of disorder and chaos and atrophy. And so what we've got to do is we've got to come from a very peaceful place when it comes to functioning. And what tends to happen for most people is that they're hyper-stimulated, hyper-thinking, hyper-nervous system. And that's generally how our society is driven, which is why we're all addicted, not me, but a lot of people are addicted to coffee and stimulants, because we're looking to continuously exacerbate a hyper-stimulated state. But that doesn't augur well for brain functionality, doesn't augur well for health and wellness. Health and wellness and brain functionality actually optimizes when we're in a deep state of restfulness. And this is what we've found with flow states as well. So flow states come from, not from pushing harder and struggling more, but from compartmentalizing time, from staying focused, from de-exciting the mind, clearing the clutter in the mind and clearing the clutter in our day. So what it would look like is that we have greater use of our brain. We have greater impact with the things that we're focusing on, greater creativity, greater adaptive capacity, greater potential as far as thinking outside the box and thinking more progressively with our business and our activities.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating thing. It reminds me of a quote that I ran into somewhere. And I'm going to butcher it, but the essence of it is essentially when you don't think that you need to meditate, that's exactly when you should meditate, right? And we have that feeling that we can't stop. You just got to go. And at least me personally, all of my experiences within the flow state have happened from that completely relaxed. I mean, whether that's on the field or off the field, completely relaxed, completely chill. Time slows down for you, and all of a sudden decisions that you can make are just, they come very naturally. Just before we get off this performance aspect of things, just since we're hitting all the buzzwords, we've hit mindfulness and meditation and stuff. Morning routines are another lovely thing. Do you recommend anything for people to start their days, or is there a way to do that?
Yeah, the analogy I like to use for my students is when we're sort of inspiring them to take a morning routine, particularly including meditation in that, is if you think about a tree, before a tree grows up, what it does is it grows down first. And the reason it grows down is for two reasons. One is it gets nutrients, and secondly, it gets stability. And so what most of us do when we wake up is we look at the outside world. We go to our emails, we go to our social media, we go to our meetings, we go to our work, we go to our family, we go to the news. But if we can spend some time to lay the foundation of your day on health and wellness and a deep state of mind, then the rest of the day becomes built on that. And the rest of the day flows from that. So I really emphasize the importance of your morning routine. So for me, what I generally try to do is I like to do some form of movement first and foremost when I wake up. Firstly, obviously replenish with lots of hydrating, with lots of fluids, and then going into some form of physical activity. So I like to do a gym workout or a surf or a swim or something like that, something quite physical. And then I like to do some breath work, do some journaling, do some meditation. I mean, my morning routine can go for 4 hours if I really wanted to extend it, but to crunch it down if I need to, I can get most of that in sort of an hour to an hour and a half. But starting that day with a good solid hour of attending to yourself and your well-being and letting your day grow from that space, I think is really going to change the nature of your day as you move on through the day. Everything
in our society is now fast, right? 3 days to meditate to solve your life. I just recently we have another channel which is based on language learning, and we had to call it the 7-day language challenge, right? And throughout the course of the videos, we had to remind everybody, you're not going to learn a language in 7 days. This is what everyone has to be selling, and we're all about fast, 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 go, go, go. And so my question is, how long before I see these results? If I'm watching this now, I've bought into what Tom is saying, how long before I start to see, like you said, those roots being planted and something coming up out of the ground before I can be happy about it?
I think partly when it comes to meditation anyway, it really depends on the technique that you're using, because there's so many different meditation styles out there. You've got gratitude, you've got visualizations, you've got chakra clearing, you've got bedtime stories by Matthew McConaughey on 𝗪𝗛𝗡. What I tend to practice myself and where I see the best results quite quickly is using a deep transcending style of meditation. I call it Vedic meditation or transcendental meditation. Primordial sound technique are these types of styles where you get a mantra or a sound to repeat inside your head. And that mantra does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. It takes the mind deeper and deeper into those more profound, quieter states of mind. When we're just thinking or trying to empty the mind or focusing on the breath, they're useful meditations and can definitely have a role in our day. But I find it just didn't get me deep enough. And so I found, for me personally, particularly when we combine it with other modalities like doing your exercise, doing your breath work, doing your meditation, doing your journaling, then there's a sort of multiplying effect of that. And you'll tend to find within a week, coming back to quite a quick turnaround, within 7 days, you're going to start to significantly notice differences. I find most of my students in the first week will start noticing differences with their life when they start meditating.
Yeah, that's not a long time at all. Obviously, it seems like it. And I know just from working over years in order to make myself a lifelong now meditator, the struggle is real when you first sit down, because those, to put the phone down, to put whatever is going on, to put thoughts away for a second is a very big struggle. But then when you start to turn and have some momentum, when you can get that space of breath for your mind and just to kind of calm, it's otherworldly. And it really does. There's no real limit to it. I seem to find it just keeps growing and growing and growing. It just keeps giving and giving and giving. Right. You mentioned breath work. We've had James Nestor on. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the name. He wrote the book Breath.
Yeah.
What do you utilize there, and what are your thoughts on breath work just in general?
Yeah, I use different modalities of breath work. One of our retreats, we use a practice called pranayama, which is an alternate breathing between the two nostrils. And that's a really powerful balancing practice where you breathe between one side and then the other side, and one side and the other side. And that's a really good prelude to your meditation. It calms the mind, calms the nervous system, and prepares the body for deep meditation, but also balances the breathing within the body, the two left and right hemispheres of the body. So I do that particularly on retreats and quite often perform in meditation. But I do like to do the Wim Hof, a very simple, straightforward 30 deep breaths in and out, and then a long out hold at the end of the 30 breaths. Most people will probably be aware of Wim Hof's method now, and you can find it on YouTube. But I find that gives me certainly a really nice expansive use of my lungs. I really find that oxygenation of the body is really calming over the long term. I love the out breath hold, the stillness that happens in that, and the kind of, there's like a little mini DMT hit that happens. So I kind of like sort of getting off on that a little bit. It's quite cool.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a fan of breathwork in general. And there's some fascinating stuff with pranayama that I didn't even know. I've run into some studies citing that there's been at least a decent amount of benefit to people who have high blood pressure and the use of alternate nose breathing, obviously through a consistent practice, but I think the subjects, and there've been several tests on this, though, they were between 30 and 45 days, and they were showing, clear signs when some of them were still on medication and stuff like this as well. But it's fascinating to see that you can alter your entire, body chemistry by sitting and breathing for, I don't think they did it for more than 15 minutes, and when you calculate all the time wasted by whatever else we do with, whether it's our thoughts, our phone, or jobs, or worries, whatever, it's such a little input. And that's what I'm just blown away by this. And, we've had, fascinating, unbelievable people like yourself come on, and you guys will say these things. And sometimes now when I'm starting to collect so much data now over the years, it's just kind of wondering what we as a society are doing, because it's like now it seems like we kind of know, but we just like, potentially a person who's smoking understands that it's killing them. We know we should be keeping some form of mindfulness, but we're just not doing it, And so last, just to get off this, is you mentioned apps, or you mentioned an app as well. And I know there's some people who are back and forth. Apps are the easiest way for most people because they know they're going to be on their phones. How do you feel about that, introducing these sorts of practices to people?
Look, I think anything that is a tool or a mechanism or a device that is going to help us to reach greater levels of the human experience. What we're not talking about here is quick dopamine fixes like scrolling through TikTok or, getting Uber Eats to deliver you a bowl of ice cream. What we're talking about here is something that shifts your inner state in a better way than what it was. And look, if that is what Calm App's doing, or Headspace, then I'm, anything along those lines, it's going to add some value in your life. The technique that I teach, we recommend using just an internal mantra that you repeat inside your head. The benefit of this is that you don't need your phone at all. You don't need any external distractions or noises. Once you get your mantra, it's something that you use inside your head to take you deeper and deeper and quieter and quieter. And the point of this exercise is that we don't even get attached to the mantra. It's just a mechanism like an Uber driver to take you to a destination. And what the mantra is doing is it's taking the mind deeper into what we call transcendence. Now, transcendence for the human experience means to go beyond your physical, mental, and emotional identity. And this is such an important experience that is one of the key missing ingredients for the human experience. Is like you said, we're driving towards a cliff, but we don't realize how close we're getting to us as a species driving off the edge of that. Yet we have the capacity to alter the direction that we're going in. To the idea that drinking Coca-Cola and getting wasted on beer and watching just crappy TV and just, inanely numbing ourselves more and more for short, quick, instant fixes is a recipe for disaster for the human species. And all we need to do is just look at the traditions, the practices, the tribal cultures, the spiritual communities that have removed some of those dopamine distractions and integrated some form of, we call it sadhana or practice, that is going to enhance and improve your life. We see their levels of fulfillment to be far, far superior and greater, their levels of health, their levels of mastery in the human experience, much, much better. And it's not that complex. It's very simple, really. And so that transcendent experience for me is one of the key components in the optimized human experience, because it gives us incredibly deep, nourishing rest when we drop into that state of being awake but not having a thought. And the second thing is that it gives us such an incredible mind expansion into the field of consciousness itself, which is not the mind inside the skull, it's the mind that's outside the skull. That's the field of mind. And I think that's really important, that we are able to access that field through meditation, and we should be doing that on a regular basis.
One of the most important things that I have learned interviewing all of these high performance leaders is that clarity of mind is crucial to your success. And what good is clarity of mind without clarity of sound? Which is why today's podcast is sponsored by Rode. We across 𝗪𝗟𝗡 use exclusively Rode audio equipment in order to do all of our stuff. If you are an influencer, if you're just a person out there trying to make some good content for your stuff at home, wherever it is, Rode is by far the best audio partner we have ever had. We have been using their stuff for almost 5 years now. Has never let us down. Truly incredible company, especially with all of the other affordable things that you guys can get from them. Check out the link right down below and enjoy the rest of this podcast.
The fact that you bring up consciousness is perfect because in a very interesting sense, we started this by talking about what those companies are looking for from you. There are aspects to meditation that are very esoteric. There's some fringe areas of meditation that I would imagine maybe Amazon or Oracle don't necessarily want you to focus on. But I know undoubtedly all lifelong meditators have had, let's just say, weird things happen to them. What has been your experience? How do you help people deal with those, whether it's in individual or retreat settings? And because, when we're talking about words like going into the deeper mind, not just your mind and consciousness, what does that really mean? So how do you guide people through some of these more mystical experiences in meditation?
I think a lot of it comes down to discernment. So knowing who the audience is. It's like if I know as a professor at university and I'm teaching quantum physics and I get invited to fill in for the day in my daughter's year 5 maths class, I'm not going to teach them all quantum physics. It's just going to blow their minds and they won't be able to absorb any of that information. It's just going to be mumbo jumbo for them. So I discern as to the capability and the level of intrigue and curiosity and absorption capacity for the person that's in front of me. And so interestingly, I was teaching the Department of Education of New South Wales the other day. So this is the State Department of Education, 25 of their staff members. And I was quite amazed at the level of inquiry that was coming through from that community. You start with little bits and pieces. And then as you sort of progress through, it was a day workshop, taking them deeper into deeper meditation experiences. But I was really quite amazed at the level of inquiry. We wouldn't have seen that 10 years ago when I was working with companies. 10 years ago, I was just talking about, this is going to help you sleep better. And, you're going to have better blood pressure and, might help reduce your cholesterol. And so we talk what we call 𝗪𝗪𝗡, very sort of basic level, body level sort of stuff. It's going to make you more efficient and you're going to have, better productivity levels and better focus, those sort of things that they're looking for. Whereas these days we're finding that the inquiry is much better. I worked at a large consulting firm the other day, one of the world's largest consulting firms. And afterwards, a guy came up to me and said, I've done 3 Vipassana retreats and I've been meditating for 5 years. And when you said about this, does that mean that you're talking about, and it was going really deep into sort of non-duality and spirituality. And yeah, it just comes down to tuning into the audience's level of receptivity to it all.
Yeah. I mean, we've had on Dr. Dean Radin, who's coming on again, and, he is very deep into finding some scientific backing for a lot of these experiences. And I asked the similar question because it's just so weird that we have to kind of ignore that. I understand that this is probably our gateway in, and like you said, you don't teach quantum physics to a 5th grade class. What you want to do is ease them in, and it does seem like that could potentially, when we look back over 50, 100, 150 years, is this the start of it being the normalized part? Because that's where you start, right? Down here to a society who now has lucid dreaming courses and classes, or it's just a standard practice for everyone to lucid dream or out of body experiences or whatever sort of, mystical experience. Because there's another aspect to this that is, once again, back to the buzzwords and world, manifesting. It's very linked to the meditative practice. It's very linked to these sorts of things. Do you get people asking how best they could manifest something in their life?
Yeah, we particularly in our retreat, we do a lot of focus on manifesting. The first half of our retreats is about clearing a lot of blocks, a lot of stresses, a lot of limiting beliefs, all the things that sort of getting in the way of them, because everyone's manifesting every day. This is the first premise, is that everyone's manifesting. They're manifesting the hairstyle that they've got. They're manifesting the clothes that they wore. They're manifesting the partner that they're dating. They're manifesting the house that they're in, the suburb they're in, the job that they're in. And they manifested all that through choices, some subconscious, some conscious, some not so conscious. But ultimately, everyone's manifesting in some way, shape, or form. Of course, there's variabilities that come with that. But helping people understand the mechanics of the process of manifesting, understand the power of their intention and their vibration in the process of manifesting is a big part of what it means to manifest more of what it is you actually want. And not really what you want, but what you actually believe you're capable of receiving. And so, yeah, it's, for me, I think all these practices are all well and good, but does it really apply to making your life better, and how does that work? So I think we don't want to discard all of that. It's so important we learn how to play in this field. And this is something that if we look at the timeline of the process of us becoming more conscious, more awake, more aware, we can definitely see an exponential growth curve. And if we chart that and future forecast, we can see that this species of ours is going to be really awake and really healthy and really conscious and really connected in, a generation or two. It's really, really quite exciting. If we're having these conversations now with you in Zagreb and me in Bondi Beach, right, Australia, then, it's a testament to where we were just 10 years ago. We've come a long way.
And you touched on the mechanics of manifestation, and just to zoom in a little bit, could you maybe just go deeper into what that actually is? Because I know we've had a lot of success discussing that on the channel. I think they'd be very interested to hear your aspect of how that process might actually work or function, or how they can actually attempt to utilize it.
I think it's twofold as far as the mechanics of it. There's two movers, two levers that work together with the manifestation process. The first lever that we've got to work with is intention of thought. So the thought that we have inside our head is almost like a signal that sends out into the ether, into the field of pure potential. And so what we have in that field is all possibility currently in that field right now. And so this Apple mouse cannot have been manifest without someone having an initial thought about creating this mouse. And these glasses cannot be manifest unless someone initially had a thought to design and create those glasses. And every single form that you can see in the room, this mug, could not have been manifest unless someone came up with the design, the idea, the intention. So the starting point is the thought and what's in that field, which will be created in the future. So anything that's going to be created in the future, every single thing that's going to be created, like that necklace around your neck, the headphones, the microphone, the picture in the background, anything that is going to be manifested and created in the future is in that field of possibility right now, which is bursting with possibility, because it means it's unlimited and it's infinite of what can be pulled out of that field. And as a human, you start to go, holy moly, I can play with that and extract out of that some form of intention and creation. So the thought is the first one. The second one is the vibration, and that's the feeling level. Because you can have a thought, oh, I want to manifest something magnificent in your life. But if you've got a vibration that is in some way, shape, or form repelling that, then what's going to happen is you're going to get frustrated because you're trying to pull it in with the creation and the intention and the thought. You're going to repel it because there's some block in your energetic field that's saying, I'm not worthy of that. I'm too afraid to have that. Or there's some complexity. So usually what I call the engineer department will block it. So what happens usually when we're designing something is the architect, let's just say we want to build a house. So the first step in the creation of the house is that there's a design, which is the thinking and the creation of the idea. And so then they start to design the house. And before it goes to the builder to start building the house, it has to pass through the engineer's department. The engineer has to say, hang on, we've got a problem here in this design. There's a flaw in the design and we can't proceed to creation of that and the manifestation of that design because there's a glitch in the design. We have to fix that glitch. So what that would look like is that I had this classic example where I had a student was wanting to manifest becoming a diplomat, and she had all the qualifications to become a diplomat. And I said, okay, so let's look at what's blocking you becoming a diplomat in the engineers department. There's something blocking that because in every reason you should be able to manifest this. So what we found out was that she was from Philippines, and one of the core values of the Philippines is family. And I said, what's going to happen to you when you get qualified as a diplomat? Where are you going to get posted? Because I know somewhere around the world. I said, and so what's happening is that you've got an intended desire to manifest becoming a diplomat. But what's trumping that, I don't know if we want to use that word, let's just say what's gazumping that is that you have a more powerful force that is disrupting your intention to manifest something. And so that was a block.
I mean, it makes perfect sense, because everyone does have these competing processes, and understanding the mechanics of that, then you can start to analyze yourself, which is what you helped her do in order to figure out what she, can truly be doing or letting go in order to get what she needs. When I was doing some research, I was looking at your website, which had unlocking creativity as one of the bullet points for things that you help with. And so I got to thinking, a bit about when I've come up with my most creative stuff. And then I started to thinking a huge portion of it has to be this feeling of freedom that I have, this feeling that I don't want to get boxed into what the standard, and that's, we don't have VC money coming in and pouring, so we can't just take any idea and just go here. It has to be good, and it has to be good, and it has to work, right? And if we fail, there's nobody that's just going to come in and just clean up our mess. And so I was wondering if you had to look at this from an aspect of a creative aspect of my life, if a person who's listening to this and saying, I have to choose my job, I have to choose my spouse, I have to choose, what I'm going to do on a daily basis. Being creative allows you to see so many more opportunities and so many more options than what you're doing if you just rush or don't sit down to maybe enhance your creativity. And so where I'm going with this is, what would be the best way to enhance your creativity? And in some ways, even potentially your intelligence or your competence in choosing what to do next, et cetera. Hopefully that makes sense, but I would love to know if there's a way you think in order to enhance your creativity.
There's a beautiful quote from Oprah Winfrey, who does transcendental meditation or Vedic meditation. And she said, the constancy of stillness, it is only from that space can you create your best work and your best life. And so there's two things in that. Firstly, she's talking about stillness, but the constancy of stillness. So maintaining a consistent status quo throughout your day where your mind is not in hyperstimulation mode. So sustaining through regular meditation practice a stabilized experience where the mind is operating from a much deeper place, a much calmer place, allows you to access that field of creative potential consistently throughout the day, not just in meditation. But what she's talking about as well in the second section is that you create your best work and your best life. So what is your best work and what is your best life? It's something that is full of creativity. It's full of adaptive capacity. It's something that allows you to weave and move like an Aikido move to the fluctuations and circumstances of life, and be more creative, more adaptable when these sort of situations arise, and moving through the day on a regular basis. So I find definitely you can enhance your creativity by embracing some meditation and stillness on a daily basis. But if it's a consistent process, that's morning and evening, morning and evening, morning and evening, morning and evening, then we eventually sustain that as a long-term benefit. Now, a beautiful quote from Ray Dalio, the world's largest hedge fund manager, who also does these deeper styles of meditation. He said that this guy, trades 180 or managed $180 billion worth of assets at Bridgewater Associates. And he tweeted that the key ingredient for whatever success he's had is his meditation practice. So this guy manages $180 billion and is constantly every day having to be creative with $180 billion worth of money in what he's going to do with that. And yet he attributes that success to his meditation practice. So I think this says a lot about the power of stillness and the power of de-excitation of the mind as far as tapping into that field.
Yeah, it is truly wild what can happen. It's such a funny thing, because once you have the habit of being unaware or fixed on dopamine, it's hard to believe what you're saying is true. Right? Is that you have to put it down. You have such a pull. And that's what's the amazing thing. But once you can switch it, just like if you were someone who didn't work out, and those first few trainings are hard. And then, if you can get over the first little hump and get to that second week or so, then your body starts to crave, the running. You start to crave working out, and it starts to change. And then the momentum switches the other way. And it's just, I feel so many people there's such a hard, myself included. I know how long it took me to start meditating, then fail, 6 days on, 3 months off, 1 month on, 1 year off, like this. It was, it's wild until it fixes, it sets, and then you can really get it in. And then the only thing I was thinking after that was, why didn't I start? Or like, why did I not think that this, in the same way that you think if you're really rushed and busy, when you finally sit down to take your and calm that mind, whether it's even in a sitting practice or just you catch hold of your thoughts, you immediately think, just sitting in nature, right? Or whatever, you just think, what am I doing? And I read a very fascinating book called The Japanese Art of War. And it's steeped with it's not necessarily about war in the same sense of war strategy, like the Art of War, the Chinese version, but because it has all of these Zen Buddhist themes throughout. And one of the most fascinating things within that is the calling of the mind in its agitated state as a sickness. Is you're sick, right? And they would classify our society as sick, right? We are sick, that we cannot control or have any sort of understanding of, our thoughts that are coming at us and doing this, and the belief that you should be working in tandem. It's your partner. It's a tool. It's something that you craft together, and you should really be the arbiter of its direction and where you're pointing that laser. And I don't know what books or how you got to this point, you yourself, but I always talk about books, and we always talk, and I know you mentioned obviously the ones that you've written. What books had a huge role in your upbringing to this point?
Yeah, I devoured a lot of books. I'm a big reader like yourself. And yeah, I find that books are so powerful because the consciousness of the reader is getting injected into the words in the pages. And then that is being lifted back out by you, the reader of those words. And so it's a really interesting transition, I think transition is the best word, where they're transitioning from their consciousness into the book and then the book into your consciousness. So look, I think Play of Consciousness by Swami Mukhananda was a really big one for me. I kind of carried it around everywhere. It was so powerful, which is his autobiographical account of his journey into, I guess, awakening. I really loved a lot of Deepak Chopra's books were really quite influential for me. Quantum Healing was a big one. Perfect Health and the 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. Neil Donald Walsh and his 3-book series, The Conversations with God, was just an absolute game changer for me. Such a huge awakening reading that book. And then Dan Millman, his book Way the Peaceful Warrior, had a huge effect on my life. That was very impacting. And then of course comes Eckhart Tolle with Power of Now and A New Earth, which just was like, there's just so many profound books that have had such a big impact on my journey. And, so much kudos to all of them to play a big part in my experience in life. Bhagavad Gita, the interpretation by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, again, was another great classic that his interpretation of that was much more of a householder sort of integrated way of embracing it and approaching it. So I really appreciated that interpretation as well. So yeah, there's plenty for the readers to get their teeth into there.
Totally. It's funny because I had just written down The Power of Now right here. It is a fascinating book in general. And it's what strikes me for most of these books is the simplicity with which they can get across. So the subject, just the power of now, he's almost told you the entire book in the title. It's basically, and so one wonders what you read, and then you read it, and then you even understand this. You have this deeper understanding, but you still you're wrestling with the idea of like, oh, well, duh, of course. That's what's going on, and that's how I should do it. I mean, I don't know what your takeaway was from The Power of Now, but for me, obviously, the general and obvious one of being in the present moment. I have an interesting obsession with and curiosity with time, whether that's time travel in a conspiratorial way or time travel just with your consciousness. What it's like to remember something. What does that mean? And precognitive dreams and stuff like this. And just in general, what did you take away from The Power Now? If you remember your biggest takeaway from that book.
Yeah, I was the same with you. It's like The Power Now and the other book, Letting Go by David Hawkins. Like the whole book is like in the title, just let go. It's like, what else are you going to write about here?
Yeah.
But that constant reaffirming of the power of this present moment, and how also observing and noticing that the mind really does not want to spend a lot of time here. It really wants to spend time here in the future and here in the past. And it doesn't have a lot of interest in this moment, which means that the mind is actually hijacking and distracting, and to some respects, destroying many lives. And it has absolutely scant regard for your wellness. What it's interested in is hypothesizing, projecting, remembering, forecasting. And so it constantly plays in future and past, and leads to a huge distortion in our state of well-being. So we've really got to master the mind. This is one thing that I took away from Eckhart Tolle. One thing I was a little bit, what's the right word, without being critical, I didn't feel that it really showed us the technique to stay in the now. It talked a lot about the now, but I'm like, dude, tell us how. And look, I knew in what I took away from that, which I really loved, was that it was validating a lot of the practice that I was using, because the practice that I was using by default was leading me to the now. So the way I teach my students now is that being in the now isn't the process. Being in the now is the byproduct of having a meditation practice that you consistently use on a daily basis. Being in the now as a process is extremely arduous and extremely challenging because the mind doesn't want to be in the now. So if you have a meditation practice, by default, you'll end up being more in the now and being more aware of the senses, which are experiencing the now, and the mind is just a lot quieter.
Yeah. And one of the coolest things for me about finally cementing my sitting meditative practice was how when you first start, you are basically in a world of whatever it is, anxiety, this, that, unawareness. And when you sit down to meditate, it is potentially the only pocket of time that you have to do this. And you immediately want to rush to get back to your fix, whatever it is, the thought that's bothering you or the phone or whatever it is. What I noticed that was very cool and really helped me to understand, like, essentially the power of now, was when the meditative sitting practice started bleeding into my life. When pockets of hope, where are you going with that thought? Like, why are you so, off balance here? Come bring it back to center, follow your breath, stay here in this moment. When it started to happen without me, calling it forward, I started to realize, I see what's happening, right? It's becoming that stream, like you said, it's becoming that continual moment. And when that becomes your then continual state, you can only imagine, obviously. I mean, God only knows what some of these guys, and I don't believe you have to go off to the mountains, and go to the Himalayas just to become this. But on another, just from an athletic standpoint, it fascinates me to think, well, what would it be like, if we all had to take time or take turns and go away for 2 years to 5 years and really do, like, what would you come back with? How would that change, all the nonsense that you're worried about on a day-to-day basis, and how would you attack those problems? And, what is their what's the normal consciousness not like for someone who's been around or meditating for 15, 20 years? I wonder if your students, do they believe that they can, with all the modern stuff, and you've got the app and stuff, and do they really believe that they can change their lives with, a few minutes of meditation? Do they get it? Or does it take a while for, this stuff to set in?
Yeah, it's a really good question, isn't it? And trying to find that sweet spot balance of enough stillness and retreating and reclusing on a daily basis, whilst we still have families and work and finances to deal with. Or how much do we need to just sort of head away? So in about 3 weeks' time, I've got a retreat in Bali where we take people away for 7 days, and it's a deep immersion where, again, it's one of those processes. Let's take them away from their phones and away from their distractions and put them into deep immersion. And yeah, it's a really powerful experience. But we do tend to find, even just so what we recommend with my students is 20 minutes morning and 20 minutes afternoon. Now, for a lot of people, even myself, when the teacher suggested that, I was kind of, you've got to be kidding me. Like, there's no way I'm going to be able to fit that into my day. But when we break our day down and we have 72 20-minute pieces of pie, that's 24 hours with 3 portions of 20 minutes in each hour. So it gives us 72 20-minute little segments. And if you think about what we're doing with those segments, everyone on the planet is doing the same thing. We're all trying to extract and commoditize fulfillment out of each action, out of each moment. And so we're trying to get fulfilled, yet if we look at the planet and we ask ourselves, hey, we've got Uber Eats, we've got, alcohol being delivered to your door, you got, Spotify and Netflix, you got, you can pretty much access fulfillment as much as you want. You can order clothes online and you should be able to be pretty darn happy right now because you can get pretty much fulfillment on tap. Yeah, what we have is a society that's riddled with bad health and riddled with unhappiness. And so we know that commoditization extraction model of fulfillment, outcome-oriented happiness, is just not sustainable. And in fact, the greater happiness we can extract out of the world, the polarity of the pain point that comes with that gets increased as well. So what we all want to do is cultivate an internal arising of fulfillment from within. We call this self-referred fulfillment. And so when we have cultivated internal fulfillment, this is happiness without a why. That's the question why. And then what happens is we get fulfilled in our own right without the need of any outcome or acquisition. And so with that kind of little spiel, I suggest to them, look at your 72 20-minute pieces of pie. Look at where you're allocating your time. Ask yourself, how's that working out for you? And if I could say to you, if you take 2 pieces of pie and put 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon, and make them unconditional to sitting in meditation, I can pretty much assure you that within just a short period of time, weeks and months, you'll be noticing an internal arising of fulfillment within. I get a lot of students message me, go, I don't know what it is today, but I just feel happy. It doesn't make sense, right? Because normally they're looking for a pinpoint of what's triggered their happiness. And that's what we call outcome-oriented fulfillment. And what we want to do is get a society. It's not going to augur well for online shopping. Amazon might struggle a bit if everyone's enlightened and fulfilled, because that need to continuously purchase things, that need to continuously experience things will simply melt away. It doesn't mean you'll be completely living as a monk and not having anything in your life, but it just means that need for it to be a form or source of fulfillment will simply melt away a little bit.
Yeah. And it changes people. I think it was a book on the CIA and military, and their concern with introducing these sort of meditative practices to one area of it. I know they've done plenty of research, and that's a whole nother topic that I'm actually curious to ask you about. They were scared that it would take their edge away. And this is, you run into this, and I know some sports psychologists who have run into this as well. Athletes that have the idea and notion that if you meditate, you're no longer ready to go, get into a 2-foot tackle like in my sport or something like this, or ready to go bite somebody's head off when they are getting ready to score a goal. What would you say to that, to it being able to amplify your best things, best attributes, and take away the things that are, hurting you?
I think you do definitely get a reassessment of core values and what's important. That said, I think there's a sweet spot where these types of practices can really enhance your capability on the field as a sports person. That's why, the LA Lakers, what was the coach's name again?
Phil Jackson.
Phil Jackson, obviously brought in meditation. The Seattle Seahawks, the year that they brought in meditation, they won the Super Bowl. So, we've seen this consistently, that it is something that can definitely enhance people's performances when we can get them using certain modalities and techniques to get them into those flow states that you talked about as a sports person. There's nothing worse for a sports person, particularly someone like a golfer, that, is very much about the head in those sort of situations. They can be 3 strokes ahead of the pack and come down the last day and 9 holes to go, and you can see them completely explode and melt down. I've seen that many, many times before. I think Greg Norman, an Australian golfer, and Ian Baker Finch are classic examples of the mess that the mind can play in sport. So having the ability to master the mind. There's a great book by Deepak Chopra about golf for enlightenment, I think it's called, which is how he uses the mind in playing golf. So, but then there's also that potential, of course, as well, not to disregard this side of things, is that it can, when you get into more advanced states of consciousness like non-duality and enlightenment, you start going, you really want me to run around this field chasing this silly little ball and trying to beat other people to the point? Like, why would I do that? And if I don't do that, I'm miserable. And if I do that, I'm fulfilled. This polarity of pleasure, pain, like I don't want to be in the pleasure, pain dynamic. I want to be in bliss. And when I'm in bliss, that sort of chasing balls around for accolade just doesn't seem to come into my way of thinking anymore. I'm more interested in living in the bliss, but also acting from that bliss to support other people to find their bliss as well and help remove the suffering from the world. So things like allocating your time from fulfillment will be very different than time allocated for fulfillment. And what we tend to find, people who are stabilized in fulfillment or in bliss tend to go in places where they're in some way, shape or form, most of the time supporting other people to try and find the same thing.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it. And I wanted to touch on, because we started with morning routine, is there a pre-sleep routine that you give your students?
Yeah, I think morning and evenings, the top and tail of the day, is such an important part of it. I mean, I think all day, every day, we want to be very mindful about the way we're doing things. But there's definitely a way to close out the day. I've got a success planner that I give to my coaching clients, and people can buy it off my website. It's a daily journal book that's clearly mapped out for you. So there's a morning routine, which is mapping out your day, mapping out your 3-year goal, your 5-year goal. What are your key attributes? So really recoding the mind on a daily basis using the success planner. And then there's an end of day routine, which is 7 checkpoints. Did you drink 2 liters of water today? Did you stretch today? Did you exercise today? Did you read a book today? Did you did you meditate today? So it's a really cool checklist. And then we finish that journal off with 5 things that you're grateful for that day. So it's a really beautiful start and end to the day using the success planner. But what I tend to find at the end of the day, a really great close, I like to stretch a little bit just to unwind any tightness in the body, particularly if I've been sitting in a chair a lot. I like to do some breath work, usually just some very gentle pranayama or something to quieten the nervous system. Nothing too rigorous like a Wim Hof, certainly nothing like that. And then I like to do a really gentle, simple meditation just to, again, zero in my thoughts onto a single point and calm the mind and the nervous system, which is a great prelude. Sometimes I read a book, and I like to finish with some gratitude as well. I think there's something really powerful about finishing your day in positive territory. And anyone, no matter where we are, will always be able to find something that we're grateful for. And I think if you can sort of go through, 3, 4, 5 things that you feel grateful for that day, leaves the mind of this beautiful little uplift, little uptick at the end of the day. And I think that augurs well for sleep and augurs well for the next day as well.
I find it incredibly important to find that spin. I mean, not in an overly optimistic and naive way, but if you can taint your life with a bit of positive hope, it tends to lead towards, you looking for opportunities that will lead to expand that hope for you and for people around you. And I mean, I know there's a push, and I can understand the idea behind a pessimistic / realist viewpoint, in which case they try to shy away from saying like things are going to get better. It's, it's kind of that they have this, because I believe it's coming from the notion that we avoid pain better than we do to seek out pleasure, which is, has a lot of merit to it, because I think a lot of what we're talking about today with us being obsessed with phones or scrolling and things like this is just an avoidance. I don't know that we're necessarily, seeking pleasure, but we're definitely making sure we don't deal with the problem that we know we have to deal with. And so in any case, there's a subject and part of this whole spiritual world that I guess you could say has to deal with conspiracy in the sense of, do you believe that our, let's say, governments, institutions, et cetera, do they have a greater understanding of this practice and these practices than the general public? Do you feel that there is any subterfuge at all in not allowing a society to have and be in the way that we just kind of described? Is it in their best interest to have a society, like you just said, what's the point of me paying my taxes? Why don't I just relax here, live off my land, and I don't want to go to war, or whatever it is, whatever. Those are just examples that I can throw out. Do you feel that there is any sort of push like that in the world?
We know definitively that there are countries that don't allow meditation, don't allow the use of the word, don't allow the practice. Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't that long ago that you couldn't even do yoga in Malaysia. There's Sharia law there. So meditation still very much, you have to be very cautious with that. It's not something that they really support or condone. We know in China, there's a lot of concern around the use of meditation practices because it allows people to expand their mind and break free of the shackles of constructs of society. I mean, even this morning it was quite interesting, and I'm not saying either way which way we should go on these sorts of things, but Candace Owens is trying to get into Australia to do some talks. And, she's an amazing, in some ways, some people will be challenged by her. I totally respect that and understand that. And not everyone would vibe her, but they're trying to ban her visa from coming into Australia because they see her as a risk to our society. And yet she listed in her Instagram reel today 5 superstars that came into Australia that had track records and had been in prison and had used gun violence, that were all rappers that could sell out stadiums. And she's saying like, hey, I'm not allowed in because I'm a risk to society, but you're letting these people come in droves who've got track records and prison records. So look, we can definitely see that there is some degree. I don't know how much of it is controlled and how much of it is conscious and how much of it is just ignorance. They just don't know. They don't know about these possibilities. It's really fascinating. I mean, for me recently, I've been working with the education department and trying to integrate some of these practices into schools. And I've got all the science and all the data and all the statistics that show if kids do this meditation on a morning and evening or morning and afternoon basis, within the school curriculum, that school will outperform nearly all schools. It's been studied, and there's schools in America that actually got these statistics and prove that this is the case because kids have better brain potential, less stress, less social conditioning and social phobias. There's no school in Australia yet that's willing to put up their hand and say, yeah, we'll give that a crack and we'll have a go at that. And so I don't think that they're being nefarious. I don't think that they're trying to suppress anything for greater control. I think they just kind of don't know anything different. And if it's seemingly not broken, then let's just keep doing what we're doing. I think it's generally probably, I like to be probably a little bit maybe naive at this point for some people, but maybe that's the case. I just don't have enough information to have a definitive answer for that one, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's a tough one. You know, I feel like I go back and forth sometimes. So I think that the general answer is probably somewhere in the middle. And it brings it back to me to the thing that I think is this most powerful thing about this is if you want to see yourself, if you want to see your true potential and who you really are and what you can really do, you've never seen it unless you've gotten a hold of your mind. I kind of put it out as a call, and I do this within our football where we teach a lot of, obviously on our football channel, we teach kids, and I'll go around and I'll do these interviews with the best players in the world. And they will always come back with the same answer. I'll say, what is it that makes you, and you're looking for some training, some coach that did something. It's always the mind. It's always, they go, the guy who did it, I played with guys who were better than me, but my mentality was better, you know, and the guys who make it here, they think different. All cultures, many years, it's always that. And so I put the thing out. It's like, even if in your life you've achieved something great, what would it be like? Who would you be like if you got a hold of, you know, the true mechanisms of your being and really started to steer them in a way that made more sense for you and for everybody around you? It's just fantastic. I just feel like there's no stopping what the human, you know, capacity could be. And part of my mission for this whole thing is to expose this belief that you are set in stone, is because from this point where you're at and how you think about yourself, you are thinking from that level of consciousness. Once your level of consciousness evolves, you start to think differently about your surroundings and what's possible for you. I don't know if you found that to be the case. I mean, you must have witnessed some pretty crazy changes if you have been doing this for so long and seen students where they first start as meek, you know, and then really coming into their own. I don't know if it confirms that for you.
It's like the veil of illusion gets pulled back. And you start to see, instead of seeing this filtered way of life, you start to see a deeper truth, a deeper understanding of the mechanics of it and what's going on and how it's going on. And coming back to what you're saying, you know, if you look at some of the big dictators in the past, you know, your Lenins and Stalins, and what is the first thing we know that they did, you know, back Pol Pot, what we tend to find is that they took out the intelligentsia. That was the first thing they did, was they removed the intelligent people, because it's a lot easier to control people that aren't intelligent and people that are sick. Yeah. And so if we wanted to go down that rabbit hole, that there's probably some merit in a conditioned state of unhealthiness and unhappiness in our society, because it's easier to manipulate and control people when they're in that state. So there could be potentially some of that being played out, but we know definitively that people that have tried to control large populations in the past have always looked at removing intelligent people, the free thinkers, because they're the ones that they're harder to control. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that capacity to realize greater potential and to see things differently starts to happen when people start to do these practices, I think.
What I find most interesting about this, I mean, we've already talked about how little has to go in, and then this curve just then starts to just, you know, exponentially take off. What I find most interesting is that in the past, there's this belief, right? You know, I just did I had an interesting discussion with a guy named 𝗪𝗏, and he as a matter of fact, it was a debate, let's say, with 𝗪𝗏 and a guy named John F. White. John F. White studies myths and their upbringing and what this means from human culture. He's very much of the belief, you know, that these war myths, they have truths within them, whether that's the Great Flood or Atlantis or any of these things. They're myths. They humans use them to say things. And Matt is of the belief that there is potentially some concrete and literal truth to some of those things. And I always loved the idea of wondering, could there be something to, was there a golden age, where there wasn't this idea of what we have here today? This a complete, what if there was a society that had more than, it doesn't have to be everyone, because I don't know what the percentage would be like today that we have of awakened individuals, or at least we have a society that's potentially could be said to be awakening. But what does an awakened civilization look like? Have you ever thought about that? What does the ideal society look like without claiming to have this utopian thought?
Yeah, we talk a lot about it in our courses. It's part of the integral teachings of the Vedic tradition. The Vedic tradition recognizes these long yugas of time, or eons or epochs of time. In Sanskrit, they're called yugas, which is around 10,000 to 20,000 years each. So we're currently in what's called the Kali Yuga, the age of ignorance. Some say we've kind of just moved out of it into another interim stage before Sat Yuga, which is the age of enlightenment. And so definitively what follows on from Kali Yuga. Now, Kali Yuga is considered the bleakest and darkest time for the human experience. It's the time when we're most obsessed with physical forms and the most distance from source or the divine. Some would call it God. And that's why we have so much sickness and pain, and conflict. Those three things, sickness, pain, and conflict, is simply because of that distance from where we are to where we can be. And in Sat Yuga, the age of enlightenment, it is a time when people have embodied and realized the true nature of life through whatever it's plant medicine, breath work, yoga, meditation. And it's not an accident, I believe, that these modalities are all now integrating and infiltrating into the mainstream. And, we've got people in San Francisco getting in their lead jets going down to South America and doing their plant medicine. We've got people doing, retreats galore all around the world doing their meditation and breath work. So there's this incredible shift as we're moving into an enlightened society. Now, in an enlightened society, what it looks like is that people experience themselves as part of a unified field. So they no longer experience themselves as an individualized, separated, segregated person. They're seeing themselves and experiencing themselves as part of a unified collective field, so that anything that they do as a touch point in the world will in some way, shape, or form impact an extension of them, which means that they're motivated highly to make the collective in some way be uplifted and fulfilled, because the uplift and fulfillment of the collective is an uplift and fulfillment of themselves, which is the whole. And so an enlightened society is one that we have incredible levels of harmony. We transcend and liberate ourselves from the distancing and the shackles and the distinguishing of religious differences, political difference, sporting difference. All that win-lose paradigm that is in what we call Game A just melts away when we move into Sat Yuga, which we call Game B now, which is a win-win paradigm. And it's an infinite game, because the longer we play the game, the better the world's going to be. Whereas at the moment we're in Game A, which means the longer we play the game is a definitive cutoff point. It's a finite game, and we can't keep playing the game the way we're playing it forever. It definitely has an end point.
Do you have a belief on whether karma is real or how it functions?
In my mind, I believe it's a scientific phenomenon, the law of cause and effect. There's no question about it. Just go and have a look at things. It's quite phenomenal, I find anyway. And it's not so black and white like people think. I stubbed my toe, I must have done something really bad. I don't think it's like that. But, it's quite phenomenal how, let's just say, you see an old lady crossing the road and she's got some shopping bags. Out of kindness, you go and help her carry the bags. She goes, "Oh, thank you so much. Here's $5. Go buy yourself a coffee." The vibration of that goodwill gets extended and reciprocated in a cause and effect dynamic. Then instead of going and helping that granny cross the road and carrying her bags, when she gets to the other side, you go and mug her and steal her handbag. And of course, what happens is someone sees that, they go and crash tack you to the ground, they hog tie you, and then next thing you're in prison and you've got 3 years for, something terrible as far as a consequence of that action. And there's a reciprocation vibrational response to that particular action. Sometimes it's quite instantaneous, sometimes it's quite delayed. I tend to find, quite interestingly, the more conscious and high vibration we are, the quicker the vibrational return or reciprocation of that frequency boomerang effect can happen. It's quite interesting, which helps us refine more and more quickly. It's a really interesting quickening that happens in the refinement. In lower frequencies, there's longer delays in the karmic consequences sometimes, whereas in high frequencies, they're quicker timelines, shorter timelines from that response, and that's positive or negative vibrational charges to it.
That makes a whole lot of sense, especially as I mentioned, Dr. Dean Radin before. One of his explanations for manifestation was to put yourself, let's say, in this state of calmness, a state of just balance. And then he kind of called it a spin, and then you want to just, based on what it is that you want to spin, right? And then the further discussion talks about, well, how to do that. What does that mean? And then the higher states, right, or the more efficient states, then means you can affect that change to a greater level and to quicker, right? And as you talk about frequency or necessarily vibration and being the higher vibrations of doing that, my question to you then just becomes how to raise your vibration. I know that's another buzzword, but how would you then raise yourself? Because everyone would want to then get up there.
Yeah, you'd think so, but not necessarily so. A lot of people like the low vibrations, which is why we watch horror films. It's why we go to scary fun parks. And if you look at if you Google love frequency chart, it's a measurable chart of hertz, Hertz, which are frequencies that we can measure in the state that you're in. So if you're in shame and guilt, which is a really low frequency, it's 20 to 40 hertz. And then if you go into something like anger and fear, you're sort of looking at 50, 60, 70 hertz. So these are very low frequencies. But if you get into love, which is 528 hertz, it's quite a high frequency. Now, most of the planet's sub 200 still, which is a lot of fear, a lot of anger, a lot of conflict, a lot of shame, a lot of guilt. So collectively, the planet still is sub 200, I believe. And when you have something like 𝗝𝗪𝗪𝗡, it dropped really low for the whole planet. It was quite brutal. So you can have a couple of events on the planet and drop the frequency quite substantially. But when you look at the highest frequencies, which is peace, interestingly, and enlightenment, so peace is 600 and then enlightenment 700 to 1,000. What happens in these higher frequencies is that the vibration is so high that the ripple effect of that, the resonance of that, obviously that comes back to the law of manifesting. You're starting to manifest high frequency experiences and high frequency people, high frequency environments. And so it's really quite interesting. But to get into those high frequencies requires due diligence, and it requires diligence, it requires discipline, it requires practice, because collectively, if the norm is to be 200 or below, that means you have to do something that is not congruent and normal to the norm, which means the food that you're eating, if you're going to go and eat, I won't pick a particular fast food chain's name, but if you go and eat some of this fast food fried chicken and then have a bottle of Coke and then go home and play Mortal Kombat on your computer till 4 a.m, smoking, whatever, then the frequency of all of that collectively is quite low. But if you wake up in the morning, you do Surya Namaskar, some yoga asana, do some breath work and some meditation, you eat some really healthy food with high vibrational food, you read high vibrational books, you listen to high vibrational music, you watch high vibrational TV if you're going to entertain yourself with TV, you hang around high vibrational people, you're in high vibrational localities. So some locations have higher frequencies. In America, for instance, you'd say something like Sedona, maybe Joshua Tree, maybe where else? I think there's even pockets in California. I think Topanga seems to be quite high vibrational. Ojai, just from my feeling of traveling through some of those places. But then you can have some really low frequency places, which you're going to have to work really hard independently to up-level yourself in a lower frequency environment. That's why when we run retreats, we choose particular vibrational areas that are going to support the uplift of that community. So Bali, which is unfortunately deteriorating its frequency a little bit lately because it's got a lot of low vibrational stuff happening in it now. And then you've got Byron Bay in Australia is very high vibrational. I think there's Pai in Hawaii is very high vibrational in my experience. So finding locations that are going to support that elevation for your community is really powerful for a retreat experience.
Yeah, I've never actually thought about it like that. But yeah, when you put it together like that, you're factoring in so many different
variables.
Variables that makes so much more sense because, and I think it's important for people to know that because, if they are doing these low vibrational things and then sitting down for 5 minutes and going, I want a new car or I want a new job, you're working uphill. It's like an uphill battle. Yeah.
It's trying to get FM radio and AM radio or AM radio and FM radio. It's just, there's a mismatch. You're not going to connect.
Yeah, I think that needs to be said. I mean, so many times that information comes a bit disjointed, right? People potentially just not to pick on The Secret, but might like read The Secret and then just like boom, go out there and just think, not change anything and just try. It may be the seed to get things going, but wow, there's so much that can be done. And Yeah, listen. Okay, I've got one more quick question, and I know we'll get out of here right now. But just to close it off on the locations, I found being by the sea for me at any time, sea, ocean, whatever. It's hard for me to be sad.
Yeah,
you know,
hard for anyone to be sad. Yeah,
what you know, and so it's like when you start to notice it, it's like you can really play with all these variables in a way that can probably uplift you as a whole. Absolutely. Overall. And so that's a very great point. But
well, moving water has negative ions in it. So there's definitely anything where there's moving water, particularly waves, crashing waves. You know, you notice when people go to the beach and they're jumping into waves, it's very hard to be glum and miserable when you're jumping through waves that are jumping all over you. The same with under a waterfall, the negative ions from that crashing water under a waterfall, it makes you gleeful. You actually get a bit of a high because of the vibrational effect of that waterfall. And the other thing is rainforest. So rainforest is very, very high vibration. So you can go hiking through a rainforest. It's going to be very hard to be glum and miserable when you're hiking through a rainforest because the 700 to 800 hertz usually in a rainforest.
I've traveled all over the earth, but I've yet to go to a rainforest. That'd actually be kind of a cool experience. What and where should people find you, look for stuff from you if they want to continue this journey that we've set them off on? Yeah,
I'd love to hear from everyone. I'm on Instagram. Probably my main source of contact is Tom Cronin, just all one word, Tom Cronin. And I respond to all my messages. I love to hear from people, and I'm quite proactive there on my Instagram. And then obviously my website, tomcronin.com. They can find me there to see what's coming up in my calendar. Retreats and workshops, teaching people now around the world globally through my Zoom programs and mentoring programs. So yeah, there's plenty there for them to find.
Awesome. We will link to everything obviously down below if you are watching this on YouTube, or in the show notes if you are listening to this. Tom, it's been awesome. I always really love talking to people who are, knee deep in meditation and in spirituality and in doing these things. And you definitely did not disappoint. So I appreciate it. And hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, it was great fun. It was great hanging out, and thanks for listening and tuning in, everyone. Nice to share space with you.
All right, guys. See you later.